During the Tuesday, February 7th City Council meeting, there was an agenda item pertaining to improvements that would be added to 12475 Windy Lane, a building owned by Talty Sud, who leases the building to the Kaufman County Emergency Services District for the use of fire safety to be provided to the Emergency Services District. Keep in mind this building is located outside of Forney city limits and is owned by Talty Sud, not the city of Forney. In February of 2022, the Forney City Council approved $1.3 million to be expended to add resources at this location, including the additional firefighters, equipment, and engine to provide fire service to the south side of Forney on an interim basis until a new fire station could be funded and constructed. Although the topic of a new Southside fire station was presented as a dire need at the time, which is why this expenditure was approved in the first place, the City Council and Fire Chief put that decision on hold for 9 months until the bond election. Not until the public safety portion of the bond was rejected was the RFQ for this project approved by the City Council. Tuesday night, the City Council was presented with the decision to approve construction services for a $660,000 improvement project to the Talty Sud-owned building. However, questions started to arise about whether the City of Forney had done its due diligence in receiving the proper approvals from the building owner and generated a contract between the two pertaining to the improvements to the non-city-owned building. After attending the City Council meeting and witnessing the discussion about the project, there was obvious confusion amongst the City Council, City Attorney, and Fire Chief pertaining to the contractual obligations of the City after Councilwoman Schlinsker brought the issue to light during the discussion.
Mr. Zook, would you like to address the questions at the dais?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Council. Councilmember Schlinsker, what can I try and answer for you?
I just had a couple quick questions, Carl, because I spoke with Ms. Barnes-Smith earlier today, and one of my concerns is that we have yet to see the agreement between the Kaufman County Emergency District and Talty, and kind of coming back to our forensic audit that basically said one of the biggest things that everybody saw was that we needed to be very conscientious about contracts we entered into. Obviously, the JAC was one of the biggest sticking points. My question is are we on such a time crunch that we cannot table this until next session so that Ms. Barnes has a chance to review this? Also, council would have a chance to see it. Because a couple of my other questions were, we estimated $1.3 million. We've got $660,000 on here, but if I remember correctly, I think that also included like 9 firefighters, an engine.
Correct. The minutes from the February 15th, 2020 meeting are below.
I try and figure out how much an engine is going to be, how much our firefighters, is that 1.3 going to cover it? My other question is that if we're going to spend the money we are on these modular buildings, my hope, and I think everyone that's sitting up here would like to see in the next 2 to 3 years, we do get a Southside fire station. What is the intent after we have a Southside fire station with this? Since obviously we don't own the property, I guess, not trying to be a smart aleck, but are these modular buildings going to stay there and continue to be utilized, or are we going to basically have something that we're already dealing with that now we're going to add 2 modular buildings to 2 trams that are just sitting somewhere?
Well, most of this I'm going to defer to Jenny Barnes, our city attorney, and Chief Briggs.
I do not have a copy of the 99-year lease agreement with the Emergency Services District number 6 and Talty.
So our city attorney hasn't seen the contract between Talty Sud and the ESD?
However, back in April, both the Emergency Services District and Talty Sud approved the site and the plans for these interim facilities for the fire department. So we do have that blessed by both parties, the ones that own the property and who is leasing the property. So we do have that solidified.
Now, I talked to the city attorney today, and the only notification the city of Forney has received pertaining to the approval of this project is from the ESD, who doesn't own the building. Talty Sud, the owner of the building, has not provided written approval to the city of Forney's legal department as of February 15th, 2023.
Does that protect us? That, let's say, for an example, the emergency district decides to pull out? Because, I mean, I don't get into the rumor mills, but I know at different times there's been talk that they could possibly move to Terrell, for an example. Where does that leave us?
So with regard to them pulling out,
I mean, we don't own the building. We're on a lease.
The City of Forney is not leasing the building from Talty Sud. The ESD is. The agreement between the City of Forney and the ESD is to provide fire service to the district only. It does not include an agreement to allow for the City of Forney to add improvements to the building, which is owned by Talty Sud, not the ESD.
I'm trying to make sure that we're protected, but I'm also trying to figure out with this investment in 2 or 3 years, what is the intent to do with that building? Are we going to move those 9 firefighters to hopefully Station 2, there's new Station 1 on the south side? What is the ultimate goal for this property in 5-6 years?
so looking at the standards of cover sites that we have looked at, that is not an ideal spot for a fire station based on the city's station locations. The board understands that. They have the different maps that we've drawn up with the GIS department looking at potential sites. The initial conversation the board has had with me is at some point in the future, potentially asking the city if they want to sell the building where they can use it for more interim facilities as they build facilities in the county. That's one option for us to get some of our money back out of our initial investment to have this Southside facility ahead of schedule. As far as the physical building that sits on the spot, it will likely turn into reserve apparatus storage and equipment storage. We don't have a lot of extra space either in the city or the county for either organization. It's pretty centrally located.
A centrally located building is not a good spot for a fire station?
So it would be a beneficial facility to use for that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is it something that with that initial investment, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but how much would we get back for those modular buildings, different things along those lines?
I don't have,
And again, I know
a way
you
to
don't have a
answer
crystal
that
ball.
at this point.
I guess my biggest concern is that I trust, but until we have a contract in hand, that makes me very nervous that our legal counsel hasn't had an opportunity to review it. Now, obviously, I'm only one person, and maybe I'm just looking too deep into it, but that's just kind of my thought process on this.
As far as a legal contract with the ESD,
The contract that Ms. Barnes hasn't seen yet,
That would be a lease between
the 99-year lease.
and the ESD.
So, if anybody else.
While the City of Forney Legal Department should also review the lease agreement between Talty Sud and the ESD, more importantly, the City of Forney should have a contract with Talty Sud pertaining to our investment in a building they own, covering liability issues, long-term use of our investment, and recovery of our investment if Talty Sud decides they need their building for other uses, among other things. The other issue is, what if the ESD decides they want to contract a different city for fire services?
I think part of your question was also, and Chief, maybe you can answer this, is if this waits till the next council meeting, that's obviously going to delay this contractor starting in 2 weeks.
Meanwhile, the entire project has now been delayed almost a year, and now delaying it by 2 weeks to worry about protecting the city is a concern? Now the assistant city manager talks about his concerns for what has been budgeted for the project, and the fire chief doesn't understand that the budget is also to include firefighters to man the station.
correct.
To give us time to at least look at where we stand with our budget. We have some things that are on that itemized list that went as part of the exhibit that haven't been actually pinned down yet. But I know the modular building obviously is an executed dollar amount that we're running with, the 280-something thousand, and now this one would be something we would be committing to with the contractor, as well as a few other things are just allowances and some contingencies in there. But this budget is tight. It was established over a year ago. Construction inflation's all over the place, so we're finding things are coming in higher than expected as well. And so there's obviously some things that we're trying to work within what was established at the time about a year ago, I think, was when we were throwing this number together. And fortunately, we're just not getting where we thought we were on some of the items.
So currently the project isn't falling within budget, but we need to hurry and approve it without a contract with the building owner after it has been delayed a year? Cecil Chambers goes on to ask the fire chief if the ESD will be contributing to the cost of the project. The answer is no, but listen to Chief Briggs fumble through his explanation.
So this year, the ESD increased their rate of contribution to the city through their contract by $500,000. That was what their rate increase as far as the increased revenue that they had. So they're contributing funds to the city, but as far as contributing directly to the project, they're just partnering with us in providing the facility site so that we can continue to operate out of it.
The 40,000 residents in the ESD will contribute $1.6 million to the City of Forney in budget year 2023. The total budget for the Forney Fire Department is $7.3 million. The 25,000 residents within city limits are responsible for the difference, and we are funding all of the improvement to this building, a building the City of Forney does not own.
At this point, they're contributing 100% of the revenue that they bring in is currently coming to the city. They're working on they've engaged a financial planner, they've engaged a real estate broker, and they're working on several projects. ESDs are governed by a little bit different set of rules through the legislature, and they have the ability to increase their tax rate, but they also have to be mindful of the amount of revenue increase because there's a cap that they can have each year. And I'm certainly not an expert on the ESD side of it, but with working with the board, they've explained to us where they're at, and one of them is if they can figure out a way to incur debt, then they can increase their revenue. But it's a balancing act, and so they're working through the steps to engage a financial management firm to get some of those things in progress.
If the City of Forney approached the ESD and asked for help with funding this project back in February, the ESD could have held an election in November, just as the City of Forney did, and asked its residents to approve a tax rate increase in order to incur the debt needed to contribute to this project. But instead, the City Council and Fire Chief elected to have City of Forney residents fund the entire project, again, for a building we do not own.
Following back up on Carl said, the personnel, how will that be funded? Because I thought for some reason, and I don't have the minutes in front of me, but when we did the 1.3, I thought that was the engine plus personnel.
It's my understanding that you can't dedicate capital funds for personnel. Right. That's a budget item. It's a separate budget item. So that when you all asked what we thought it would take to make this interim facility go, we came up with facility, apparatus, vehicles, equipment, all of the things it would take to make it work besides the bodies, and that's where the $1.3 million estimate came from.
No, sir. That is false.
So we've got the 1.3 will cover the engine and the building.
And all of the gear and equipment that goes in it to make it a functional facility.
And then we have it in the budget.
You have hose and all of the other equipment that goes along with that apparatus.
And then we have it in the budget for 9 more firefighters?
Yes, okay. To staff this facility.
I mean, what happens if they walk away?
If we walk away?
No, if they walk away in this lease, what happens?
They can't afford to.
But what if they did?
Then we go to providing service to the corporate boundaries of the City of Forney, and the citizens in the county are left looking for somebody to provide emergency services.
The correct answer is that the City of Forney will have no contract in place that protects its investment in a building it does not own. On top of that, there is no contract in place with Talty Sud that protects the City of Forney from liability in the event that its contractors cause damage to the Talty Sud property, among other things.
The board has been very adamant about the partnership that we have. I completely understand Councilwoman Slinsker's concerns. I just don't see it.
So we'll hinge taxpayer dollars and liability on a good old boy handshake agreement.
So why the rush? I'm just curious. Why are we pushing this now and not waiting on the contract?
Are you talking specifically with a contract on the use of the facility?
Exactly.
The service contract?
Both. I mean, so we're pushing this through without a signed extended contract, correct? The contract
we have an existing service contract.
This concept should not be so confusing to those who are elected and hired to run our city.
In April is when the ESD and Talty agreed, both of them agreed that this should move forward, and they supported the plans and the site for this interim facility.
That was my question is, I think that's where I was trying to figure out the time lapse, that if it was done in April, why is it not and again, maybe I'm just looking too deep into it, and I'm probably a little gun shy after the audit, as far as like the contracts go, and because I am 110%. I agree we need the station. I live on the south side. I understand it as well as anybody, and with that growth over there, it's just, again, this was put in everybody's face about the contracts, so I'm trying to figure out why this was done maybe in April, and here we are almost, how many months later, and it's not been through legal? But
The board's perspective is they don't think they need one. If we feel we need one, then that's something that we need to go back and draft and try to put in place.
Hey guys, the ESD told me it was cool. No need to protect the city or its taxpayers.
I'm trying to figure out why we haven't had a chance to review that contract between Kaufman and Talty.
I can take a look at it. It was brought to our attention that maybe there's one word that needed to be altered in this agreement.
And I think what you said is...
I can take a look at that, but it was never brought to our attention. Both parties to this contract agreed that this was proper use of the land and facility.
Okay.
Can we contract with the ESD?
I don't know that we're a third party. We're within the ESD, correct?
Our legal department did not know that we aren't part of the ESD and that we are, in fact, a third party in this issue.
Well, technically,
That's shaking heads.
the ESD doesn't extend inside the city limits. I mean, the city limit boundary is where the city stops and the ESD begins.
Any further questions for Chief? Thank you very much. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item number 4, a resolution awarding a contract to Home Run Construction for the Interim Fire Station number 3 project. Is there a motion to approve or deny?
Since there was still so much confusion about the subject, James Traylor motioned to take the subject to executive session. Even without the contracts in question, they reconvened out of executive session and approved it anyway. As of February 15th, the City of Forney Legal Department was unaware of any such contracts, and although Amanda Lewis, Sarah Salgado, and Jason Roberson pushed for the $100,000 forensic audit mentioned by Councilwoman Schlinsker, all three were silent during this discussion. For more videos like these, subscribe to the State of Forney on YouTube and like and share the State of Forney on Facebook.